Hey, what's up? I've been talking to Bob and thought it would be a good time to make a feedback video since those seem to work better than the write-ups in the document. I know we're coming in pretty hot with the gallery, etc. So I just wanted to take a minute and grab stuff from week 6 or so, plus your Paintovers, plus the latest pieces to try and like plot how things are shaking out and how much you guys got out of the Paintovers. Um, Looking over these with Bob, he was saying kind of the most important thing anyone learns in game art and really any kind of entertainment art is that you will never get it right the first time. And you'll inevitably make wrong choices, and learning from those choices and being ready to correct them or go back to the drawing board is what will really enable you to do great work. Um, and I think everybody's come a long way with these environments, but even more than that, if you were to start new environments tomorrow, you're not. But if you were, utilizing everything you've hopefully learned over the course of this assignment, they would be twice as good or 3 times as good, or more. And so as you get close to wrapping this one up, like, don't worry if it's not coming out exactly how you pictured it or whatever, because everything you learned from what did not go right on this one is going to go straight into whatever you do in the future. And these things snowball over time. The more different things you do, the more types of lessons you'll learn, and you gain like a certain level of confidence attacking almost any task, which is really nice to have. So I would say don't overreact to anything we have to say here. You have to finish your work for the gallery and everything. So don't sacrifice finishing anything just to respond to feedback. Just take it for what it's worth as you're wrapping things up. If you can do something or respond to a piece of feedback, then do. Otherwise, just file it away or whatever. So starting with this one, this was the other week's version. Paintover was shrinking this down. Looks like sort of making the shelves more uneven, which is a good call. I think canking this one to the side, adding the center objects, and then lighting this one up. And I remember we had some feedback about maybe not having this large fluorescent light and having a smaller hanging light bulb or something sort of more intimate for this scene. And it looks like there's no light source anymore, apart from the big one that is now apparently off. But it does look like the light is coming from a smaller source, which is great. I actually think that's a big improvement. Comparing it to here where, the light structure, the value structure of this picture is pretty good already, but like it's still very bright out to the sides. Like the lid of this box is one of the brightest pieces of the scene, and you don't want people necessarily looking down there. And I think having that smaller point light probably, allows you to have sort of a darker area here. I think that looks really nice. The sort of dark frame around the picture, based on that light source, is really helping it. It does look like this is smaller. It looks like you've put a lot of work into the water heater, which is cool. I don't know what it has to do with sort of the running away story. It seems like it's just kind of an incidental object. So maybe maybe more time on sort of the hero props would be a good idea. But in any case, looks good. Nice water heater. Yeah, I think these are improvements. I don't know what's happening with the door here. If you are shrinking it or growing it, like there's not that many verts in these sort of boxes, so it seems like you could just right click and drag these out in a couple seconds. So I guess close the gap, unless maybe the parents ordered the wrong size door and that's what's happening here. Everything needs resize. I don't know what that means in context. I'm sure this makes sense if I was in class, but I mean, I would, if I was prioritizing things to work on in this scene, I would probably want to start getting color in there, both in sort of maybe quick color mattes, even if they're just a solid color on everything, and then start adding your colored light, because I think we were talking about the other week, me and Tom were talking about having, your main light source, your incandescent bulb being sort of a yellow, a warm color, orange, and then balancing that with some kind of blue coming in from an open garage door. That's just a thought. It's just an idea. But I think having color movement in the scene, like the lighting is good. I think you don't need to worry about the lighting anymore. But starting to bring in color into the scene it's a good time to do that, I think. Yeah, and then obviously making your final assets. These are still here. These are going to take some time, I think. And then a lot of these could probably just be as is. Jars, spring, that kind of stuff, probably good. The water heater is probably fine. The boxes, I would probably try to ZBrush them a little bit, get a little bit of wear and tear on the edges, make them look not perfect. And then as far as sort of wonking stuff around, it looks like you have been doing that. I would try to think as much as you can about gesture when you're doing that kind of thing. Like if this one's going down in that direction, then maybe this one's going down the other way. Not enough that it looks like the jars would roll off, but just a small amount. Maybe this box. Like think about sort of a rhythm to those objects, and maybe you can use them to point a little bit more toward focal points, etc. Like there's a lot of opportunities here for stuff like that. Pipes, like I had given, I think, a suggestion to wonk the pipes a bit, and I think you added like these sort of right angles, which wasn't what I was thinking exactly. I was thinking more of just like slight imperfections, zigzags in the pipe, like it's not perfectly fitted. And maybe stuff like that down here would be good. The one thing that I definitely would change is this table is at basically the perfectly wrong angle to this scene. Like you're getting a straight on view of the table. You can't see the top or the bottom, and then it's rotated, it looks like, toward the camera so that you can't really see all the legs either. Like it's almost just three lines. And I don't think that's a useful thing to have in your composition, especially right by the center. I was suggesting before, like maybe putting some of this stuff up on the table. That would make more sense to me personally. And maybe you could bring this table down. I don't know. There's problems that would take some thinking and trying stuff to solve here, and maybe you don't have time to tackle those. But I feel like right now the biggest issue with this scene is just that like this is supposed to be your focal point, and it's like kind of small and on the floor, and it's not the most attention grabbing object here. Like the water heater still has this dramatic light on it and makes me want to look over here, and I'm like, what's up with that water heater? Who cares about this kid and his adventures? I want to look at this water heater. So maybe there's something that can be done. Maybe bringing down the light on here. That's a cheap fix, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's good. You have a really nice amount of detail in your objects here, and just taking all these to sort of a more finished level and getting some color in there is gonna make this look pretty awesome, I think. All right, so Casey's piece. I think so. We've been talking a lot about silhouettes, and let me see. Oh, I'm filming this on my non-tablet monitor, so I won't be able to do a good Paintover. That's too bad. But anyway, yeah, I feel like we've talked about silhouettes a bunch, and just to sort of reiterate, like if you want an object to silhouette well, you want it to either be a dark object against a light background, or a light object against a dark background, and that those are sort of your only two options. And you really want to make sure that where you have an interesting object that's supposed to be a focal point, you want it to read clearly against the background. And I think that I know you had 3 different sort of lighting scenarios in whatever week this was. And this was my favorite mainly because I can see the tower. Like, it reads really well. I can see the whole shape, and it's an interesting shape, and I want to look at it. Versus and also like there's enough fog here that the sign is popping against the mountains in the sky. These are looking pretty good. There's a tangent here, but other than that, it's pretty cool, right? Um, so this was I think the most successful one as far as readability, even though it didn't have necessarily the most atmosphere. Um, so this Paintover I think was the one that looks like you went closest to. And yeah, like I said to Tom, and I think he forwarded those notes on to you guys. Um, I think there's a good idea here in having sort of fire in the camp that's casting light here and casting light up onto the tower. Having a huge flame right up by the viewer is this is drawing all the attention. Like the number one rule of composition and your focal points is the eye is going to go straight to the place where there's the most contrast in the scene. And here you have basically black and basically white, and it's a really large white against a really large black, and this is like just intensely grabbing the eye. So I was saying, don't have a torch right here. And my suggestion to have a bonfire down in the middle was sort of, that would allow you to light up the tower more. It would draw the eye toward the base of the tower and then give you other opportunities to sort of draw the eye up the tower. It would still work with sort of this lighting where you have light seemingly coming out from the middle towards the skulls and up here. So like a smaller or just a campfire, some kind of fire in the middle, I think is what I thought would be good. And I think it looks like you did that. However, like it's not really working here because the firelight is just blowing out this area a huge amount, and then very, very little of that light is making it to the tower. And in fact, for whatever reason, this side that's facing the fire is actually darker than the side that's facing away. I guess you have a directional light. I don't think this is really working. And I know this isn't your final one. I'm going to get to that in 1 second. But, and then you have the skulls, and we talked about this too, is like, don't use like a really shiny material and everything, because it's creating these highlights and speculars that are like sort of giving you a non-representational image of your scene. Like when you put textures on here, these barrels and skulls and stuff and the ground aren't going to be shiny. The ground isn't going to be reflecting the tower. Like that doesn't make any physical sense, and it's adding sort of garbage to your scene that confuses the composition, and there's really no reason to have it there. So that's that on that. This looks like a photo. I would not do that. If you want to have some kind of interesting background, I would paint it. I think grabbing photos is copyright issues, and also just like I can tell that's a photo. It looks very cheap. Like that's something that I would see in the early 2000s or the 90s or something, but it doesn't really pass in a modern environment, I think. So going to the final piece, I don't know why this is like low res, but regardless. So, we talked about placing omni lights and stuff to get more light here, and I think it is better. This is now illuminated more. Skulls still look really shiny, and actually going over here, like we had this with the samurai model, I think, and like really watch out for this. This, like, you have broken sort of planes, your normals are fucked up or something. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I'm seeing very hard edges and triangles on what should be round and smooth objects. And you can't rely on 3-key smoothing to just fix all of those for you. Like you should be able to spot these and just fix them, smooth these normals out, because that's not that's especially when it's way up close to the viewer. It's like, whoa, this does not look correctly imported or something. So anyway, back to the fire and the lighting here. The fire's still like the brightest thing, and obviously like a fire is going to do that. There's not a ton you can do about that, but I think you could continue to push, dim the fire and add more spot or omni lights maybe. And then the thing I suggested we were talking on the Facebook, and I suggested putting the moon behind the tower to silhouette it. And it looks like you did put the moon there, but it's so dark that it can't actually silhouette it, right? Because, like I was just saying, like a silhouette is either a dark object behind a light object or vice versa. And this is a medium dark object behind another medium dark object, and that's not gonna create a silhouette. So, you know, like in this case, not always, but in this case, the moon you'd want it to be bigger. And so, if I were to put the moon in here, right, I would be looking for tangents. I would make sure not to have the edge of the moon line up here or something like that, or line up with where this touches the umbrella. Like, that's bad. I would want to sort of stick it out somewhere where it's clear where it begins and ends, and it's, you know, maybe it's intersecting here and here, and now it's tangenting with this X, so maybe and it's also tangenting with this corner. So I'm going to try to get it in a place where it's not going to cause those type of problems. And this is hard. Like, this type of thing is annoying and difficult. But, like, this probably has a tangent that I haven't spotted yet, but I'm going to just put it in here for now, you know. And white, I think, is too bright, you know. And if I was going to have a bright white moon that was definitely the focal point, I would probably dim the fire, dim this down to sort of embers, and I would try to keep faking the light on, you know, the red, maybe red light. For if the fire's low, then the light would be more reddish, you know, casting up onto here because it looks cool. But I would definitely, like, if I was going to have a bright moon, I'd keep it the brightest thing in the scene and not try to have other things competing with it. I wonder, I was going to do Paintovers, but I seem to be filming on the wrong screen, so that's maybe not going to happen. But oof, yeah. So I mean, let me try to just fix this here. This is really rough, but you get the idea. Like, if the moon is up here, God, that's bad. The moon is up here, then it's going to be, you know, it's really going to be bringing your eye to the, you know, again, the highest contrast point in the scene. It's going to be helping to silhouette this shape so that people really can see it. If you wanted to make like a goblin at some point and have him like sitting out here, that would be cool too. You know, if I was going to do something like this, I'd probably move to more of like a blue lighting scenario. And then, like I was saying before, get maybe sort of a red-orange from the fire. That's not great, but you know, there's opportunities here. You'd want to do different lighting or whatever, but you know, you sort of see where I'm going with this. This is just one thing you could do. The point is, you know, always be thinking about silhouettes and be thinking about the level of contrast between one thing and another, and where is the highest contrast point in your scene. And that can be color, it can be light and dark. Like, all of those types of contrast are relevant. So you want to be using all of those. The one other thing I was going to say about this is, you, I think, mentioned like having trouble controlling the brightness of the sky, and there's a big issue here where it looks like you have atmospheric perspective, and this is actually an error that happens in a lot of commercial video games that drives me crazy. But if there's fog or atmospheric perspective on these mountains that is fading to what looks like basically this color of purple or blue, it's gonna, whatever is behind them is going to be that color. Like, if it just is, because it's, you know, what's behind them is more, oh my God, is more of that. I'm gonna find the right tolerance here. Oh God. Well, anyway, like, but you can kind of see, let's pretend it's like super foggy. If you have, if you have fog of a certain color, if your atmosphere is a certain color, that's what causes them to fade to that color, right? So if there's nothing behind them but more air, it's going to be more that color, and the amount of that color is going to increase the farther away you get. So if you move up beyond the horizon to the sky, that's sort of infinity atmosphere, right? So you're going to just make the sky that aforementioned color. And having, let me see if I can go back. Oh, I've run out of undos, but having the like a dark sky behind a mountain that's starting to fade to like blue or purple, that looks really wrong. So you want your sky, at least at the horizon level, to be the same color as your fog, basically. And that doesn't mean your sky has to be like one flat color. You know, in real life, when we have atmospheric perspective, you know, when you look up, you're looking up through less atmosphere, right? So that's over much, but you know, it fades because, whoops, it fades because you're looking up through less atmosphere, and as you look across to the horizon, then you're looking through a lot more air, and so that's why that looks like that. But anyway, this is a disaster now. Sorry for doing this to your picture, but anyway, you get the idea. There's stuff that can be done here. Brett's, this is cool. I like seeing the amount of assets that are being taken to a finished level. I actually, not till just now did I see the broken tentacle, which is awesome. This is not textured. I would say, like, there's absolutely no reason to go back and make another asset. Just, you know, you could just grab one of these and, you know, get some broken corner edge or whatever and just like Frankenstein those together. That's completely fine. Yeah, I'm into this. I do like the broken head. That was something that I saw earlier, and I think it was always a good idea. I do think that there's a missed opportunity in having this broken hole not really affect the silhouette. I see there's a bit of metal starting to stick out now, but like if I look at the sort of slope of his head, it's only a tiny bit different than it would be if there was a full, you know, head here. So like maybe you could just like grab some verts or whatever and just bring it down just a bit so that it's like, you know, like you'd want a clear break. Oh, wait a minute. You'd want a clear break where there's, you know, the line of this part, and then, good lord, hang on a second, I'm just going to go back and change my brush settings. You want the line of his head to be clearly distinct from this part that's coming out, rather than sort of tangenting together with it, because that makes the silhouette look pretty smooth. Anyway, that is one thought. Let me see what's going on here. I did have some notes. I like this. Oh yes, I was going to do a demo for this one. I like the spooky green coming out of the windows. This whole scene is starting to have like a Goosebumps book cover vibe, which I'm very into. I think that Bob and Jeff Sangali have both, every time they've seen this, have said, you know, put stuff inside. And I agree. I know that you have limited sort of bandwidth to make stuff, so maybe going to town on an interior is not feasible for you, which I totally get. However, I wanted to show off it looks like you're using Unreal, so the bump offset node in Unreal. So I made this material. Here is a window texture. It's doing double duty for the color map for now and also the roughness, which is irrelevant to this demo. But then I'm using 1- to make a negative version of it, and then I am multiplying that by a glow color, which is, you know, I saw a bit of your thesis stuff, so I'm sure you have done some materials work in Unreal at this point, but just to make sure I don't skip anything important. So I'm multiplying that by a color, which is giving me an emissive. In my instance, I'm setting that color to green, so I've got a glowing green window. Now, going back here, let me disconnect this here and just have this. So I have another texture that is a it's just a gradient, and I'm multiplying that by nothing right now, but I'm about to hook it into this chain. So before I multiply by the color, I'm going to multiply the window alpha or mask by this other mask and then plug it in, and that's going to give me a gradation in the light in here as if it's coming from a light source. Neato. And now if you look here, it's completely flat, obviously, because it's a flat piece of geometry and it's just a texture. However, I have this bump offset node, and if I take this over here, I've plugged a texture coordinate, which is just blank UVs, basically, into the coordinate, and then into height I've put a glow offset parameter, which I just have set to -10 right now. So if I plug that into the UVs of the texture sample and apply that, it is going to be sort of a faux 3D thing. And the steeper of an angle you get, the worse it looks. So it's not perfect, but you start to see some parallax and it looks a little bit 3D. Now, one issue is that it's tiling. You can fix that if you go to the texture sampler and set sampler source to shared clamp, and then it will not tile it. It will just basically show it once and then stretch these pixels out at the edge. So that looks a little bit better. It doesn't look great because it's reaching, the glow is reaching the edge of the texture, and then it's just stretching. You can solve that if you make a texture that fades all the way to black before it reaches the edge, and then you can combine with the bump offset, texture stuff where you make it maybe half the UV tiling, and so then it's going to become bigger, I think. Yeah, so that helps a little bit. There's different things you can do. You can also add a vector 2 to the UVs in order to offset it. There's lots of tutorials for that on YouTube, so you can get it centered or wherever you want it. Anyway, so there's the start of this thing, and then what I did was I got a couple more masks. So I'm going to bring in some window blinds here and make another bump offset. And so my thinking is the window blinds are really close to the window, and oh yeah, I'm going to need another. Just name this blinds offset, and I'm just going to set it to, let's say, 2. That's a good guess, probably. And I don't want this same texture coordinate because I set it to 0.5, so I'm going to grab another one and set it to 1 and 1. Regular default settings. So now I should have some window blinds that I can add into this chain. So if I make more space for myself, I can multiply the window blinds by everything else, and now I should have not what I want. They're inverted. So I need to invert the window blinds. So I'll just take this 1 minus, invert that, and then multiply it. Did not think through my my texture values there, but you can see that the window, that looks pretty bad, I'm going to be honest. I did not test this before I started, but you sort of get the idea here where there's stuff behind the window that is getting some parallax, and it looks vaguely realistic. My other thing I was going to try was putting this guy in here, so let's maybe take out the window blinds and just put the guy in. And he'd be standing more than 2 away, so I'll split the difference with the background and just set him to 5 and see how that looks. Also have to change the that thing. So now there's a spooky guy in the window. Doesn't look amazing. Scale looks pretty wrong, but that's a cool thing you can do, and it might, you could think about just the vaguest. You don't have to do anything except the very vaguest, most blurry shapes in there. Maybe bottles or some other kind of ephemera that might be stacked up on the windowsill, just like, and as you get farther deeper into the room, you can blur the textures more so they look really indistinct. Like, you don't even have to have something this obvious. Just just something, some kind of blurry texture that makes it look like there's a room in there can do a ton. That's what we're doing in our game right now, since we don't have the resources to make the inside of every building. Like all the windows are just bump offset with a couple of parallax planes, and it really makes a difference. So that's that. What else was I? Oh yeah, one other thing I was going to suggest was these types of stores often have, all kinds of signs for lotto, um, building health and safety ratings. All that stuff is great to have here. Gives you opportunities for storytelling if there's a missing person poster or whatever you want to put up here. Great opportunity. What else do we have? I would say I like this porch that you've put up here. I would go back to my remarks on sort of the parking lot and the ground plane, because this is still obviously like a perfectly flat surface, and I think if it's dirt, having just a bit of hilliness where maybe the sides and near the building are higher, and then in the middle it gets a little bit into a bowl, just like the slightest amount. It does not have to be obvious, but I think just having a bit of that really helps. Maybe it is and I haven't noticed it, but maybe a little more in that case. But just it really helps sell it as a place and not a sort of game building that you plunk down like a real-time strategy game. So that is our other suggestion. And then lastly, I think this is something we've been kind of circling around with this piece a lot, and I think it's still an issue. Is just sort of zooming way out. The composition feels skewed to the right, because here you used to have stuff, and I know we said take that out, and you did, so fair enough. But I just feel like there's not enough here to justify this part of the screen's like existence, and it makes the whole thing feel like, this is where the action is, and it feels really off center, right? So I'm not saying like cut this whole thing off, but maybe like I would try to move everything to about here, right? And whatever's over here, you may have to like redo some mesas or whatever, but just like that feels a lot more centered to me, and it feels a lot more natural. And like the only thing that's over here is this tree, and honestly it's not like a great tree. Maybe it's gonna be a great tree one day, but like if you really want to have the tree, like maybe you can put it somewhere over here. I don't know. I wouldn't be attached to the tree, and it's probably gonna be a pain in the ass to make, and you don't have much time. So my opinion is chop down the tree, but you can do what you want. But anyway, like I feel like this is a much more balanced scene. Maybe I overcorrected a little bit, but like that feels more centered. No, now that when I zoom out, I want to move it more again. I don't know. Do your best, I guess. And then Bob has pointed out that the moon looks like it's in front of the clouds, and now I can't unsee it. And I know this is like an Unreal Sky probably, and I don't know how to put the moon behind the clouds, but it looks like it's in front right now, and I wouldn't let that stay like that. Maybe you can like turn down the contrast on it and blur the texture a little bit to give the impression that it's behind the clouds. Like maybe that's a good way of faking that. In any case, like yeah, right now it looks like it's almost it looks like maybe it's a small globe that's attached to the Cthulhu guy, which isn't what you want. And it's also more so now that I've moved it, but even before that, it's like dead center in the frame. And before I moved it, it was almost dead center, but not quite, which is worse. You don't really want that. And I'm kind of trotting out the hits with respect to what I suggested for Casey's, but my original thought was to have the moon helping to silhouette this guy's tentacles, right? You have it silhouetting like one single tentacle, but like that's not a super effective thing. And like Jeff Sangali was saying, he thinks this guy's holding the moon, which is probably not your hope. I'm not gonna try to magic wand this because I know it's gonna go horribly wrong. But like you sort of get the idea. If you were gonna do a moon, maybe up there, maybe over here. No, that's bad. That's like a halo, like in a Orthodox Christian art. I don't know. I think my I think my first thought for the moon was to actually darken this sign, which could work because it doesn't seem like it has a motivated light source right now, and then like have the moon silhouetting this sign somehow. Maybe you could make it smaller then. I don't know. Like there's opportunities. Like if this sign was dark, then you could put the moon up here. I think you're still slightly having that issue of too many focal points with the sign and the moon and the eye and the front steps, and like there's opportunities to move the moon and sort of set it up in a way where you're reducing the number of places you're asking the viewer to look. Um, anyway, I am going on a lot about this one. I think it's coming out really nice. I really like this texture work that you're getting done here. Um, I think that post gallery for sure, you would benefit a ton. It would be absolutely worth going in and just like doing a detail pass on this. Like maybe there's a light source here. I can't see it. Maybe having a light bulb hanging down, or seeing some kind of attached lamp. And then maybe that lamp. Let me grab my black here. Maybe that lamp has a power cable that's running down here. That's dumb. I don't know why I would go in that direction, but like, who cares, right? It's a janky old store, and maybe the other light here has its own cable that's hanging down. Like there's all kinds of stuff. Maybe there's a bent satellite or TV antenna up here. Like obviously do these things thoughtfully, but like or one thing I don't like back here is how sort of yeah, actually, I wanna say, we sort of suggested sort of making this take up less space. I didn't necessarily mean to shorten the whole building, but more to like rotate it so that you see less of that side. Because I think this is a really shallow building, and I see that now you've sort of done textures on it. So I wouldn't say like go back and redo everything, but you could like dupe off part of the mesh and extend it. I would just say like it just feels like sort of shoebox shaped, and maybe having like a dumpster here or something that breaks the silhouette a little bit more. That's an idea. Having a some kind of cable attached to the side here. Wow, that's bad. Sorry, I'm drawing with the mouse. Or a rain gutter. I think having something that adds a little bit of a visual interest, not too much, but just some, would be nice here. I like sort of the green haze that you have on the horizon, and I'd actually love to see more of that. Like if you had sort of lesser amounts between the let's go between the mesas, would help sort of pop them away from each other, get a little bit more depth to this stuff. See if I can actually make this look any good. Obviously, you'd want that to be less intense than the stuff on the horizon, because there's less of it, as we were just talking about. But stuff like that. Maybe like a bit of mist coming out from here. Maybe even like begging the question of like, is there something inside of this building? What's going on? Yeah, anyway, stuff like that could be useful. These are just all random suggestions, but I think there's a ton of potential here, and the stuff you've finished looks good. I think there's probably more stuff I would want to see in this environment than you probably have time to finish right now, but I would definitely think about going back and you know just doing all this type of stuff, because it would make the scene look so cool. Um, Definitely also think about maybe like, I don't know what they're called, the concrete parking blocks to stop cars. I think right now it's sort of like it just ends here, and it's like, okay, now what? Um, you know, so maybe having those, some garbage if you have time. there's opportunities to sort of taper the amount of detail from here to the ground without just having a sharp line where it's like, okay, this is nothing. But anyway, I am going on about this one. Good job. This one's looking really good so far, and I am excited to see where you get with it. Next, this one. Okay, so yeah, there was a whole thing where I have this out of order actually. So it was like this before, and no, wait. Now I have it in order. So it was like this before, and then you did this paint over, which I thought was really good. Like it really fixed the main issue with this one, which was that it just felt like static. It feels like a something you'd find in the middle of a snow globe, right? It's just sort of this very static scene that is meant to be perfectly framed and not sort of interesting, I guess. That sounds mean, but like it's just the composition really. The rocks are sort of like, this isn't an interesting shape. It's just sort of there, right? But then this, it was like, bam, you had this huge amount of dynamic energy that suddenly was like infused into here, and the sort of this one crossing over was like really good. And I think I was saying like, I hate this rock, but I love that it's there. Like if you had just a differently shaped rock, more that's less like sort of offensively lumpy, I guess. Like that's awesome. So yeah, me and Bob reacted really strongly to this sort of change in direction. However, I only just now saw your message about why, and I think it's reasonable. I think it's a reasonable justification, and to be fair, like we had been encouraging you guys earlier to be bold and make big changes, and that this is a big change. So, you know, fair play. I'd actually love more like notes and write-ups from everyone about your thought process behind choices and revisions, because that's such an important part of the process, and it's interesting to know, you know, what kind of problems you guys feel that you're solving when you make a certain choice or whatever, because I think there's potential for more that, you know, Bob especially and me sometimes can offer more insight in those situations. So anyway, so your reasoning was you wanted to show off, I believe, your textures more and sort of the detail of the scene, which is fair. Like there is a lot in here. I will say, like, this is a lot less dramatic. It's a lot less striking. Like this grabs the attention even in thumbnail form, and this is just sort of like, okay, whatever. It's just, it looks like a real place in a game that you might go, but it doesn't look like it would stand out from a lineup of screenshots from that game. It just looks like, you know, okay, you know, and here's the one city where you go to, you know, sell your dragon bone. So that's why I was sort of like, we both reacted strongly to it, the change, and we're like, why'd you do that? But so, you know, you're trading sort of that initial exciting impression for showing off your models and textures better. And that's, you know, that's a reasonable trade. I will say, like, there's no reason you can't do something like this and then take a couple screenshots up close, you know? You can have your one perfect composition and then other screenshots from other angles that aren't as good in your environment. That's completely legitimate. Or you can have just sort of breakout solo renders of a tree or one of these arches or whatever. Like, that's completely fine. Anyway, it looks like you've now gone back to this, which I think is the right choice, personally. And there's a lot happening here, which is awesome. Let me see what I wrote down. Yeah, Bob said this is really starting to look like a complete thought, which I think is a great comment. Like, zooming out, it just looks like a piece of art. It looks like an illustration, which is exactly what you want, and so that's awesome. I'm interested to see that you sort of tilted everything here. I'm assuming that's intentional. It does look a little bit more dangerous, which maybe is what you wanted. Which it's weird because it's like just tilted enough that you don't necessarily notice it, but you definitely feel it. It just feels like things are about to collapse or something. But anyway, I do like the color you have here. I think that Um, one thing compositionally that could really help here would be to, let me see if I can mouse paint this out. I think the everything is sort of warm and yellow, red, and orange, and that's fine. But when I was looking at a thumbnail of this image, for whatever reason, this area, sort of the face of the castle and a bit of these parts, were looking really white and bright. And I thought that actually looked really good, sort of like losing a bit of that warm color and becoming more bluish, or at least more neutral white. And I think that, like, if you were able to, you might have to do some sort of cheating with the light. I'm not sure. But, you know, move it. Nope, not like that. But if you were able to, like, move it in a bit more of a blue direction, see if this will work. Little bit. I think that sort of, that pop of blue against the warmness of basically everything else, you know, obviously cleaner than that, but like, I think it really helps draw the eye even more than it already is, which I think would be really cool. Again, I think this, so one issue that Bob was pointing out with this rock formation is that, you know, you want to worry about sort of relative size of objects. Let me get a brighter brush. You know, and if we think about, like, how big is this sort of shape versus how big is this, it looks like it's pretty similar, and then down here is sort of the same, and then this is the same size, and this is the same size, and this is a little bit smaller, but it's sort of the same size, right? So you want to avoid having sort of everything be the same size, because it gives you sort of a vague impression of, I don't know, spaghetti and meatballs, where these are the meatballs. So look for opportunities to sort of dynamically make things bigger and smaller and have sort of those variations. I actually think if we go back to this point, like, the trees are dramatically huger than the building, and, like, that actually helps because they're not all the same size. You know, and maybe if the building was big and the trees were small, that would also look good, but it's just the fact that there's sort of variation there that really helps the image. So anyway, there's that. And then I was looking at your new Paintovers, and I like these. They're definitely sort of thinking in the right way. I like the bringing of the clouds in front. I think that really helps add depth to this picture. Smaller, maybe. I think, like, it's more the shape of the rock than the size. I think this sort of weird jutting thing doesn't look like a real rock. It looks like maybe a really worn down statue or something. I think it's just sort of, maybe you're trying to give room for this to come down. I don't know, but it just doesn't look persuasive. Maybe if you had sort of a more dramatic cut here, like this sticking out, this is overlapping the lower part, and then you could just, you know, have a more straight, god damn it, you know, have a more straight piece, and maybe, you know, a bit of rocky detail or whatever, but that might look better. I'm not sure, you know, maybe some on this side too. Lots of options here. I don't even know if I like that, but I'm just doing it to try it out. You know, I think you're thinking in the right direction with this stuff. In fact, I really like this cloudy stuff here, to the point that even if you end up keeping the rock face, I would continue to put that, like, cloud stuff there. I'm just gonna cut this out because I think it really actually helps pop the foreground and create this depth here. You know, I'll just cut out my own stupid rock too. You know, like, I think that really helps. It really makes the difference between sort of a high up place and, like, a place that's really, like, in the absolute upper reaches of the atmosphere. Like, this feels whimsically fantastical in a way that this doesn't, I think. So that's a thought. Speaking of keeping things the same size, I feel like on your paint over, like the draping foliage is doing a good job of sort of varying the size. Like you have long ones, you have short ones, and they're all sort of distributed in a pretty natural way. And then when we get to this one, obviously this is a computer stuff, a computer art thing, right? It's very easy to make a mesh and then just propagate it, but these all look very close to the same size, and it's losing a bit of that dynamism that you had up here. So maybe look for a way, maybe just make 2 or 3 different variants of these that are different sort of lengths and shapes. I think that would help a lot. But yeah, overall this is looking good. I think compositionally, when I zoom way out, I still feel like I'm gonna merge that stuff. I still feel like I want this to be farther over. Like I feel like that tree, you know, it was touching the screen in a way that made me crazy before. And now it's not, but it still feels just a little bit too close. And I want this whole thing to be just a little bit more over here. You know, and I'm just going to do this dumb thing. I think that looks better. Maybe you won't think it looks better. Don't change it if you don't agree with me. But that's my thought, is just having this a little bit more balanced. You know, and I was talking about that with Brett's piece too, and it's really like, how does it feel? And I don't know if maybe it feels different to you guys. This feels more balanced to me. But again, don't change it unless you think I'm right. So let's go to Jeremy's. So this is the same paint over from before, it looks like. This is the second version of the tent. I agree with your choice to move it away from that boxy military looking tent. I think this looks more in character for your, for your witch. I'm not sure what the process for this was. It looks like maybe a cloth sim. If you sculpted this all by hand, then that's awesome. But I can see these. I don't know what this was, but anyway, looks like there's sort of some interpenetration here, which isn't great, you know. But I don't know how much time you have on the tent, because I was gonna say I'm sort of concerned about the rate of progress to finish just here, because you have a lot to do. Maybe once you get these plants in and start propagating them, that'll start to change. But yeah, right now I'm sort of, and I guess maybe those candles you did in the ZBrush were meant for this, huh? All right, cool. But yeah, I would say at this point I definitely want to start seeing like textured props starting to show up in the scene. But anyway, like back to the tent, I think this is excuse me, this is cool. I think that there's opportunities to, if you have time again, make it full, you know, fill it with more character. You know, maybe if this was sticking up higher, another one on the back, and then maybe it has some of those same type of feathers that she has, on her staff in your character model, you know. Maybe not in the back, maybe just a little bit. You know, maybe between these higher ones there's like shells or teeth or bones or something. Maybe there's some more bones hanging down here, like maybe there's some kind of evil magic shit on the side of the tent. It looks like Lumpy Space Princess. Anyway, you know, stuff like that I think would be really awesome. Make sure you have really big, ridiculous looking mean stakes holding it down in the ground. That'll be really good. Stuff like that. Like, look for ways to improve the silhouette of the tent and improve the amount of character it has, because I think this is going to be one of the most interesting storytelling parts of your scene, and having this look really good will be really useful. The plants I think are cool. I'm assuming this is like a substance designer thing. I like them. I feel like they're looking a bit too uniformly glossy, and I know that this type of leaf in particular looks like that. So don't like dial it back entirely, but I think there is an opportunity, especially here, for like more roughness and color variation for that matter. These are all sort of like a flat green each, and plants tend to sort of gradate from, green to yellow to brown if they're really not feeling well. Um, so yeah, I would try to get a bit more gradation and then more variance in the roughness map, because that really will sell it as a realistic object. And maybe you're dialing back from the Uncharted photorealism to match your sort of stylized witch better. Um, but even then, like color variation becomes even more critical. While maybe roughness variation becomes less important. But whatever you're doing, I think there's opportunities to push these a little bit more, especially if they're going to be everywhere in this scene. I think that would look very cool. So yeah, nice job. Just make sure you're progressing at a pace that'll get you finished in time. And then David's, I was looking at this. I was looking at the last piece before the Paintover and the Paintover, and then the most recent one. And I'm struggling to figure out what stuff from the Paintover was you took into the final, or not final, but the most recent piece. Because I'm looking at Paint Over the Horizon, which is good because that black sort of line is definitely not something you want. Lifted up one of these gas pumps, which I think is cool. It makes it look a little bit wonky. Obviously, you don't want it floating like that, but I think that's cool. Looks like those things did not make it into this version. You have more detail on the gas pumps, which is cool, but they're even. And it looks like you did make a lot of changes, just not the ones in the Paintover. So I would say, like, don't just paint stuff because you think I want to see something. Like, really think about what can make your scene better, or what you think is worth trying, because the Paintover is a way to try things out without doing all the work of modeling. That's why it's good, like if you were thinking about putting these here or a tire up here or whatever, leaning these planks, all that stuff, like that's when you put it in the Paintover and just sort of block them in and be like, how's that look? Do I like it? Do I not like it? And then maybe you save yourself the trouble of modeling something you're going to hate. As for the changes here, I think that, like, these propane tanks are now, like, screwing up the balance of the scene, because before it was sort of centered. Well, actually, it's a little too far to this side, but you moved it back, and then you put these on this side. So now it's all skewed to the right when it was skewed to the left earlier. So I think try to make sure it's sort of balanced. Again, it's a feeling thing, but I really think that, that feels better to me, than what it was. In any case, keep going. Just think about, okay. Think about, like, what you can do to plus this up. Maybe a TV antenna. I suggested that on the other piece. I guess these are sort of similar in theme. Maybe they're on the same highway. Did I say that before? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I would say try to use more Paintovers, because I think your instincts on this Paintover were good. Like, you made good changes in paint. They just didn't make it to the 3D. Like, this darker shadow does make it more dramatic, and but then when I compare this, it looks like the shadow is the same darkness, and that's an issue with the amount of global illumination, bounce light you have happening in the scene, and that's something that you can adjust to get that shadow effect that you painted. It just takes doing. So make sure you're following through on your best ideas in your Paintover and discarding your worst ideas in the Paintover. I think these propane tanks are cool. I liked your additions to the gas tanks. Yeah, I just say keep going. And that is all the environments, I think. Yeah, that's all 6. Cool. I'm going to drive to Santa Cruz now. I'll see you guys later.